function. He was a bunch of people moving around, they were eating, and he bumped into this old lady. Her eye pops out, she had a glass eye. He catches her and gives her back to her. She says, thank you so much. He says, oh, I'm so sorry. They go on mingling at the church function, having dinner. He keeps looking at her, about the same age. They're in their 70s someplace. He looks over at her, and he finally gets up enough nerve to walk over and ask her out to dinner. She says, sure, I'll go out to dinner with you. So they're out, and they're having dinner, they're having a good time, they're socializing and all that kind of stuff. And he says, you know, I have to ask you, what possessed you to go out to dinner with me? She said, well, you caught my eye.
Oh, what a time, here's that one.
Yeah. Don't tell him.
Well, there's actually a point behind that story. I just didn't tell that story. There's actually a point behind that story. And that is, sometimes things happen that there's a cause for it. There's a reason for it. But it may not be an obvious reason. You may not have really understood why she went out to dinner with him. A little piece of trivia that I just found out about myself today. I'm actually related to Betsy Ross. I just found that out today. It was on the news, actually. And this is not a joke, this is true. They were talking about, this was actually on Glenn Beck, they were talking about the history of Betsy Ross, the flag, da-da-da. Come to find out she was married 3 times. Her third husband was John Claypol, and she was buried with her third husband. And so now I gotta go look up the genealogy on John and find out where we might have been connected. But there aren't that many Claypols in the world, and I am one of those. Okay, so a couple of things before I get started into the presentation. There's gonna be a large event that we're planning at Tri-C University. This is an explanation of this. I'm going to pass these around so it kind of explains what this is all about. The 14th of September, we've got 600 seats. We need to fill those 600 seats. Now, I'm praying to the Lord that that's going to happen, because we went into this not knowing whether we were going to even be able to fund it. 1,100 people signed the petition that I'm going to ask you to sign tonight to get the balls rolling. Of those 1,100 people, about 50 of them donated $2,000 to get this off the ground. That was an answer to our prayers. We still need more money. We still need people like you to be there in the seats. And the purpose is to send a strong message to an organization I'm going to talk to you about tonight. That's NEOSCC, Northeastern Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium. We need to send them a very strong message. We do not want regionalism. We do not want Agenda 21 through HUD and the EPA and so on and so forth. We do not want what you're selling. So I need your help. We've got to fill those 600 seats. We've got to send a strong message to our elected officials, whom we're going to invite, and to the organizations that will be invited there to have an open public dialogue. They've never allowed it. Went to a forum that they held about a month ago in Warrensville Heights. All of their forums are very strictly scripted. I spoke up, which broke their script. They called the police because I spoke up. Now, they didn't do anything, but they were there very threateningly. Thank God that a number of other people in the audience kind of provided cover, because 30 people, other people in that room spoke up, which then provided me cover. And so, what are they going to do? Take 30 citizens who are just trying to ask questions to jail? They didn't want to do that. That is the nature of what we're facing. So I'm going to pass these around. I'm going to ask you to take a look at it. I've got these petitions. I'm going to ask you when we're done here to sign this petition and to pass the word. So give me your email address. I will not use it for marketing purposes. I'm not going to share it with anybody. But we will put you on our communications list so we can update you on what's going on. Plus, we can send you, this form will send you to the websites that have the petition and so on and so forth. We need you to circulate this. This has to go far and wide. So please do that for me. So I'm gonna start it on this side, and you guys can pass these around. I'd appreciate it. Here you go. Pass those in the back there.
How many areas do you want these circulated?
I will, it's every place you can go. What they're doing, and I'm going to get more into it in this presentation, is they're covering all of Northeastern Ohio. So they have 4 what they call MPOs, which I'm going to get into again. I'm actually stealing a little of my own thunder there. But it is all of the 12 counties in Northeastern Ohio. And so we're trying to get all 12 counties, plus we've got people who have signed a petition from all over the country. Thanks to Ernie Sanders' radio program, We had people plugged in from California, Florida, all over the place. So it was pretty amazing so far who's actually signed the petition. Okay, and so I'm going to leave this petition out for you to sign when we're done, and I'll ask you to do that. So we're here to talk about Agenda 21. Why do you care? Well, because the price of freedom is vigilance. If you do not stand up and pay the price, every generation has a price to pay. During the Vietnam War, I paid a price. I had to spend time over in the jungles over in Southeast Asia. Everybody has a price to pay. It is our time to pay this price. If we do not pay this price, our founding fathers paid a price, and trust me, they paid dearly, if you look back at history and what they ultimately had to pay. If we don't pay this price, we're going to lose this country for our kids and our grandkids. And I've got 10 grandkids, and I love them to death. I will do anything to defend their futures, even though they may not even understand what we're doing. I have a granddaughter who I'm constantly trying to talk to because they're so busy texting they haven't figured out yet what their life is all about. So why should you care? We're going to talk about that tonight. The one disclaimer I'm going to give you is I'm going to raise your awareness tonight. You're going to go home and you're going to be staring at the ceiling, staying awake all night long. I will not be held responsible for keeping you awake at night. Okay? I'm sorry for that. I apologize for to shake you up a little bit. All right, what is this really? When you get down to the nuts and bolts of all this is nothing more than a battle of ideologies. There are those who feel that big government is good, that central planning is good, that they know better than you. There are those who say, no, individual liberties and freedoms are what this country was founded on. This country is a special country, and it is a special country because of that. Our founding fathers, who were very intelligent people, studied government. They studied history. They were living an experience under a tyrant. And they came up with a solution after hard-fought battles, discussions, arguments, shooting each other. I mean, this was not easy. But they worked through it, and they come up with a system that they tried to create to allow people to govern themselves. At the core of that, at the very core, our Bill of Rights is all about personal liberty and freedom. Personal liberty and freedom. Government's purpose, in their view, was to defend that. There are a group of people who don't believe that. We have zoning commissioners on our zoning board right now in Chesterland, Ohio, where I live. Anybody in here live in Chesterland? Okay. Who want to take your right away to have a fire put out in your backyard. Thursday there's going to be a hearing to talk about having you to pay $250 to have the right to burn a fire pit in your backyard. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? What country do we live in, for God's sakes? So there are those people who think they know better than you and that they're going to impose their values on you. They don't understand the core of this government, even though they raised their right hand, left hand, and said an oath to defend this country and the Constitution. So, why do you engage? I love this saying. I put it in here because I just love it. If you don't engage in politics, then you're destined to be ruled by those that are dumber than you. This says by your inferiors. I kind of paraphrase that and say dumber than you. Look at the average politician today. The average. There's some good guys out there, but the average politician, I wouldn't hire them to cut my grass. Amen. They don't have the doggone intelligence, in many cases the backgrounds, to even know how to balance a checkbook, for God's sakes. And yet we elect them because they're who shows up. We don't do a background check on them. We don't ask them for a resume. They happen to pop up on a ballot, and now you're asked to choose between two guys that happen to show up one day and self-select themselves, and you have no idea what their background is. We've got a president who is in office who has never run so much as a lemonade stand, and we want him to run one of the largest economies in the country. Engage. Engage, I implore you. This lady, in 1987, was the chair of the World Commission on the Environment. I'm just going to touch the surface on some Agenda 21 stuff. I can go into a lot of detail. We don't have enough time. I've already got 3 hours of your time planned tonight, and I think that's probably enough. I'm kidding you, of course. By the way, can you hear me okay? Am I projecting well enough? Can you hear me back in the cheap seats? Yeah. Okay.
I can hear you.
All right, I'm just checking. See if the volume's high enough. People sometimes say I've got to turn the volume down. So anyway, this lady, Go Harlem Brundtland, whatever, Brundtland, was the chair of the World Commission. She happened to have been a socialist. A verifiable, certified, on her ID card says socialist. She said that the Commission established the concept of sustainable development in its landmark report, Our Common Future. Our Common Future, just file that away. This is the recommendation provided for momentum to the United Nations Summit in 1992, which is the root of, if you know anything about Agenda 21, the root of Agenda 21. Now, it actually started back with one of her reports that was the seed material for that. This is the book that started the whole thing. It says sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. On its surface, that doesn't sound bad. Who does not want a sustainable environment? I don't want to destroy the environment. I don't want to destroy the air. I want to have fish. I'm a hunter. I want to have game animals that I can go hunt. I want deer, fish, all that kind of stuff. We want, and we have been protecting our environment. Our environment has cleaned up immeasurably since I was a kid. I'm a pilot, a private pilot, and I used to fly over the shore of Lake Erie, and you'd see this green-orange ooze going out from the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland. That doesn't exist any longer. Now, part of that's because we've destroyed our industries, and so they're not on the river anymore. But, and so the point behind this whole slide is this book, that case created by that socialist, was the root of what we're talking about in terms of Agenda 21. So you say, well, what are some of the values in that? Well, one of the values in that is coming from this guy who was the General Secretary of the UN in 1992. He opened up the whole event, the summit, and he said, current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, that would be us, involving high meat intake and the use of fossil fuels, electric appliances, home and workplace air conditioning and suburb housing are not sustainable. Now, he said a whole bunch of other stuff. Some of that other stuff had to do with this, and he said, isn't it the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilization collapse? Their plan was to collapse civilized industrial world. And he said, isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? Their plan is to transform the world, not just this country, the world. And they're in the process of attempting to do that right now. Now, you can believe me, not believe me. Anybody who does not believe Agenda 21 exists, all you need to do is go to the United Nations website, type it in, you'll see it. If you go to fedcenter.gov, which is an EPA website, push the button sustainable development or sustainability, and you will see that Agenda 21 is their source document for our EPA, our federal EPA here in the United States. Now, we don't talk about Agenda 21 because there was this same guy came out and said, well, nobody in the United States is going to go along with the United Nations program, so let's rename it to something called smart growth. Let's use terms like, let's hide Agenda 21 in terms like sustainable development, social justice, environmental justice. So the terms you will hear are not Agenda 21. In the United States, Agenda 21 does not exist outside of the source document from the United Nations. It is seed material for concepts like sustainable development, environmental justice. Those are words that we would all agree with. Who does not want environmental justice? I want the environment to be protected, and I want it to be protected fairly. I don't want the United Nations dictating how that's done. I want our form of government. I want personal liberty at the core of all that. Does anybody agree with me or disagree with me on that? Good. I was kind of thinking I was speaking to the choir. And so, let's review. Agenda 21 was codified in 1992 by George H.W. Bush, a Republican. Knowing that the United Nations, or the America would not buy into that, it was renamed Smart Growth. Other terms to use to describe it are sustainable development, social justice, environmental justice. The United States political systems are letting the United Nations undermine the Constitution, and all of our political parties are involved. It doesn't make any difference whether you're Republican, it doesn't make any difference whether you're a Democrat. All parties are involved in this. I don't know if I've got this slide in here or not. How many of you know that UNESCO, which is the United Nations organization, now controls our parks? Okay, so Yellowstone National Park, the Statue of Liberty, all of our major parks are under the umbrella of UNESCO. They use the term, they're protecting our parks. I called Steve LaTourette, our congressman, our Republican progressive congressman, and said, what the heck are we doing? We're the United States. We don't need the United Nations to protect our parks. Well, why do you have a problem with that? That was a Republican congressman. In 2009, the EPA and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, now, there are 3 organizations that have created an unholy trinity. And they've done this intentionally. They want to promote these concepts, sustainable development. It's really about power, by the way. It's about power and money, nothing else. Okay? Power and money. They want to consolidate power. That's what the United Nations is all about. They want to consolidate power and they want to consolidate money. And so the best way to push this power agenda, where they've got you under control, where they've got you in a regulatory environment that controls your world, is to get the various departments together, because the departments and the regulations do not go through our Congress. Our Congress is letting us down. They're letting these agencies usurp their power, and they're giving it away. They have the power at the end of the day if they choose to, but they don't choose to execute the power. And so there's 3 organizations, the EPA, Department of Transportation, and HUD, formed an organization called Sustainable Communities. So think about that. Housing, transportation, and the environment. The environment controls everything. Your food, water, air. In Cleveland, we're spending $2 billion to put a pipe in the ground to collect water runoff. Did you know that?
Yes.
If you ask the stormwater, and by the way, you're paying, if you live in Cleveland, I don't live in Cleveland, but if you live in Cleveland, you're paying water or tax on rainwater. Please, people, there should have been a revolt over that. People should have run down to the county offices and taken Ed Fitzgerald out in the street and flogged her. But nobody did it, unfortunately. So, those 3 organizations created Sustainable Communities. File that away. Let's go back a little bit. The Ohio Constitution actually is stronger from a private property rights than our federal Constitution. It says similar things. But it does say this, that all men / women are by nature free and independent and have certain inalienable rights, among which are those to enjoy and defend life, liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and seeking happiness and safety. Acquiring, protecting property. Judge Grindell recently made a speech, and I can't remember the technical term, but he used the term to indicate that the Supreme Court just passed a profound finding, and that was that private property rights were, I think the term was indigent, that could be the wrong term, but it means existing before any of our constitutions. Our right to private property, to own private property, existed before the constitutions. We just codified it in the Constitution. That is the core, from our perspective, of what our country is built on. Our right to own property, to use and enjoy that property as we see fit. There are 2 enemies right now in northeastern Ohio, the 2 biggest threats to that thought, that ideology. One is the Western Reserve Land Conservancy and the concept of land conservancies. The other is NUSCC. We're going to talk about more about those. By the way, the United Nations doesn't really think that way. They say private land ownership is a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice, and therefore, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's not important and we need to nullify it. The United Nations does not believe in private property. I did business for years in China. You don't have private property in China. But Chinese people are coming to our country and buying up our country, one track at a time. But because they can't own property in China. You can use it, you can't own it. And by the way, if you ask why there aren't so many people in prisons in China, it's because they don't make it to the prison. Well, I was in China doing business. They took an accountant out into the middle of the square and shot him in the head. I was shocked. They sent the cost of the bullet to his family as a message to everybody else. Don't screw up, don't embezzle. Because if you do, you won't make it to jail. So the people that are in jail happen to be the dissidents that happen to criticize somebody. And as I was going from one place to the next, one of the Chinese folks that was in it says, yeah, that's where we put those people who speak out against the government. And we pass this big prison. This is what our president recently said, or actually this is published on the Sustainable Communities website. By working together, HUD, Department of Transportation, EPA can make sure that when it comes to development, housing, transportation, and energy efficiency, These things are mutually exclusive, they go hand in hand. And that means that making sure that affordable housing exists close proximity. Now, I want you to file this away. We want to make sure that affordable housing exists in close proximity to jobs and transportation. What does that say? That does not say you have the free choice to live where you want to live. We want to ensure that people live where there's proximity to jobs. If there's going to be, this is going to come true, that means you have to determine where people are going to put a factory, how the transportation is going to be in place, and where people live. Think NAUSCC, that petition I'm putting together, that is their plan. Their plan is to determine where you live, what the transportation is. They're doing something called a multimodal study. A modal study talks about the various modes of transportation. Is it a bicycle? Is it a truck? Is it a car? Is it a train? Is it an airplane? Those are different modes of transportation. They're doing a multimodal study in northeastern Ohio to determine what modes of transportation should be appropriate to nudge you to use. I'm going to let you bake on that one for just a second. They just spent $30 million. They're setting aside $30 million for bicycle trails in Cleveland. You know, bicycle trails are really hard to use in the wintertime. I happen to bike, by the way, for exercise. I bike 10 miles every day, and I use those bicycle trails called roads. And I go out on those roads, and I bike my 10 miles, and I don't have any issues. People respect me on my bike. I got my green shirt on so everybody can see me. I don't need a bicycle trail, which I consider to be recreational. If I go on a bicycle trail, then I have to run over all those people that are pedaling around like this. And so anyway, encouraging shorter travel times, lower travel costs means safer, greener, and more livable communities. I underline livable communities because there's a whole concept in sustainable communities called livable communities. You will see that now in various cities that they're now becoming part of, quote unquote, the livable communities organization. If you have elected officials that are subscribing to this livable communities concept, we need to start talking to them, because most of the bureaucrats they don't have critical thinking. Remember back to what we were talking about, we're not getting the richest intellects elected. We're getting who show up. Their ability to discern what's good and what's bad and the stuff that's coming down is very limited. Let me tell you. This talks about smart growth. I'm not going to go into it because it touches back on this partnership. This just shows you, this comes right out of a website called sustainablecommunities.gov. If you go there, that'll tell you everything you need to know. Let me go back again. We're going to go back in history a little bit. We're going to talk about a concept that you might have heard a little bit about earlier, and that is Marxist Communist Manifesto. I didn't put all 10 planks down, but I did put the pertinent planks down that I wanted to talk about. And that is, one of the very first planks in the Communist Manifesto is to do away with private property. The target, the focus, is doing away with private property and private property rights. Think Western Reserve Land Conservancy. I'm going to come back to them. Land conservancies are a destruction of our private property rights in the United States. And they are moving as hard as they can to implement that. That's just another brick in the wall. That's just another tool that is being used to destroy private property in the United States. Another plank happens to be the combination of agriculture, manufacturing, and so on and so forth, and the abolition of the distinction between town and communities for a more equitable distribution of population over the county. A more equitable distribution. A more equitable distribution. I'd say that to reinforce. It's a presentation technique. So, let's review a little bit. Can you tell, I was a county commissioner for a little while, and so I had some experiences in there. They didn't like it when I was a county commissioner because I kept asking questions. I find it very interesting that our elected officials do not tolerate questions well, particularly if they're good questions that cause them to have to think. So, for example, in Geauga County, how many people live in Geauga County here? In Geauga County, I don't know if you know about this or not, there's a transit authority. Are you familiar with them? Okay, for $6 you can call up the transit authority and the bus will come pick you up, take you someplace else. where you want to go. That transit authority is fully funded by the federal government. The whole program is funded by federal grants. Okay? Now, most of the time, if you look at those transit buses that are out on the road moving people around, there will be one person on a bus. It's a 14-passenger bus. 14-passenger bus, one person at a time. I'm a business guy. One of the things that I do is I do business consulting for companies. And so I look at that cost model and I say, wow, the cost to run that bus for one person, would it not make, and I said this to the head of that department one time, would it not make more sense to buy a car for that person? I mean, how many people are we actually moving around? Let's do the statistics, and if there's 5 people we're moving on a regular basis, buy them a car. We'd save money. It's a multi-million-dollar annual budget. We just put $163,000, thanks to your county commissioners, Mary Samiti and Tracy Jameson, not Ralph Spitaleri. Mary and Tracy just voted to spend $163,000 for electric card readers to go in those buses that carry 1 passenger an hour. Because the drivers had to punch a paper card. And it was too much work to punch the paper card. That is the kind of thinking that they're not willing to, our elected officials are not willing to do. So with that said, I put our elected officials into 3 categories on this topic. I have approached our county commissioners, I've approached our township trustees, I've approached various people. Most of the people that you talked about at Channel 21, their eyes roll back in their head. They don't want to hear what you have to say. They don't want to talk to you about it. Because that means they have to think. Thinking is a little hard if it's not shaking hands and nodding and saying yes. It's outside of their skill set as a politician. So, politicians come in various categories. We've got the informed and engaged guys. Informed and engaged. Those guys are the Alan Wests of the world, the Rand Pauls of the world. I'm trying to think of somebody, the Matt Lynches of the world. If you live in Geauga County, he's a very informed, very engaged guy. He's a good guy. Those are the good guys. You've got some uninformed guys. They're not engaged, they're not caring. They could be good guys. They may have some principles and values that you can use, but they really don't care. They're cruising, they're bureaucrats. Their philosophy is, if I do nothing, I can't make anybody mad, I'll get reelected. That's their philosophy. There's hope in those guys. If you guys will wake up and go smack them. If you'll go to Mary and Tracy and say, Mary and Tracy, what the heck are you thinking? I would use a different term, except their kids in them. Then there are some people who are part of the problem. They're complicit. They know what's going on. They're fostering what's going on. And there are people like Dan Troy from Lake County. How many people know Dan Troy from Lake County? Okay. Dan, just file the name away. John Patterson from Ashtabula County. John Patterson is a United Nations supporter. He's a school teacher, very slick guy, very intelligent, very well spoken. I want to run up to him and follow at everything that he says. That's how well he speaks. Until you look underneath the covers of what he's saying. He's a United Nations guy. He's part of the problem. He is driving the boat. These guys are just on the boat. Hey, look at how sunny it is outside. Woo! Having a good time. All right. This is a complex eye chart that talks about how stuff gets from here, United Nations, down to here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but let's say United Nations, Agenda 21. We agreed to it. George H.W. Bush, a Republican. Every president since him has gone along. George W. Bush, Bill Clinton. Actually, the Bushes were kind of, they were lukewarm on it. They went along because they wanted to get other countries around the world to get on board with some of their things. That's the way the political game's played. You know, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And so that's kind of why they did it. Bill Clinton did it for a different reason. Al Gore is on board all 100% because he's getting rich off of it. So how does that get translated down to the EPA, a regulatory organization? They rename it to a company called the Smart Growth. Then they say, well, how are we going to make the rest of the country go along? Well, that's easy. The EPA has rules and regulations. They pass a set of regulations. They go down to the state level EPA. The state level EPA passes rules and regulations that pushes it down to the county level, and then you have the county level planning organizations who are going to classes and learning about planning. You've got a soil and water department, a building department. You've got various other nonprofit organizations who are all getting kind of brainwashed into all these various concepts, and who wouldn't want to be sustainable? It's because we're using nice and feeling terms, and we don't have people who can think. Critical thinking skills are somewhat limited. Here's another way of looking at this. This is another kind of eye chart. It's kind of cool the way that works, isn't it? Comment, or the Our Common Future, remember where that comes from? The socialist. Summary Policymakers, Earth Summit, that was 1992. Sustainable America, bada bing, it got translated into all these various organizations. This is what we're going to talk about on that petition. Smart Growth Legislation Guide, so there's legislation, and then it comes down to your town. Okay, let's talk about locally now here for a little bit. There's an organization called the Regional Prosperity Initiative. That's an Ohio-based nonprofit. This is what they said. Local government has become a drag on regional economic development, in part because of the fragmented structure of local government. Let me translate that for you. Because we have cities who have sovereignty, and townships that have sovereignty, and counties that have sovereignty, Geauga County doesn't necessarily cooperate with Cuyahoga County. That's fragmentation. Because we hold our elected officials accountable to us as citizens, and not, I don't want to be held, I can't hold Cuyahoga County accountable to me, but I can hold Geauga County accountable to me if I'm paying attention. They don't like that because they call that fragmentation. Cuyahoga County can't dip into the pockets of Geauga County, and so that's a drag. That's a problem. That's what they're talking about there. By implementing a viable and sustainable, have you heard that term before? New growth tax base. They want a sustainable new growth tax base. Northeastern Ohio communities can be the first time to share in growth. Store that concept. That is not the last time you're going to hear that concept. Okay, that's a local impact of Agenda 21. Spread the wealth. Take from the folks over here to give to the folks over here. Does that play into the whole concept of private property, limited government? No. How many of you know about smart meters? Okay, smart meters are here. Thank God in Northeastern Ohio we have First Energy. First Energy has set a policy that they will allow you to opt out of smart meters.
For how much?
What's that?
I think they charge you to do that.
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
No. Let me get rid of my gum here because it's starting to annoy me. Let's talk about what a smart meter is, and I'm going to go back to the concept of opting out. Today you have a digital meter. It's got dials on it. I'm simplifying this to some degree. A smart meter, if you see an LCD panel versus the analog dials here, it's probably a smart meter. It doesn't have to be, but it's probably a smart meter. What a smart meter does, these meters are read once a month or once a quarter, depending on what the periodicity is that they decide on. And then they bill you based on the amount of power you consume. If you consume so many kilowatts, that's what you get billed. You get billed at 10 cents a kilowatt or whatever the rate happens to be. With a smart meter, they've amped up. First of all, this is an electronic device. There's two issues with the smart meters. One happens to be surveillance of your home, intrusion into your home. The other one happens to be the electronic radiation that comes off of the smart meter. And there's been a lot of studies that have to do with this electronic radiation that's being projected from these things. I'm not going to get into that tonight, but there are people who have real medical issues associated with that, some of which have pacemakers and some other devices. I know a person that actually has a medically diagnosed problem with EMF, what they refer to as EMF, and they get sick because of that. So, but let's set that aside for a second, the health concerns, because there are definite health concerns. These meters read your electric usage every 15 minutes. Okay? Because of the way they read your power consumption, they can tell, based on what's happening there, what kind of things are running in your house. They know because your refrigerator, if the motor's running on it, pulls so much power and it turns on and off at a certain cycle, they can tell that that's a refrigerator. They can tell you got a dishwasher. They can tell that you got a clothes washer. And they can tell how much consumption is occurring during that period. So therefore, they can set policies specifically targeting those devices. In Arizona, I hear tell that they have a policy that they'll send you a note and say, you can't run your dishwasher but between the hours of 7 and 9. So they can set policies to tell you that. They're actually, the EPA right now is setting up a policy to mandate manufacturers of appliances to put smart chips in where the meters can actually control your appliance. And so, or your heat and your air conditioning in your home. So they can control whether or not, or how hot or cold your house is. If they've got great power consumption during the day and they say, well, you know, too much power is being consumed, then we're going to ramp down everybody's meters or everybody's power consumption. So in essence, it is, first of all, surveilling the inside of your home. They're surveilling what you're doing at a very detailed level, and they have the ability to control it if you have the chips in these various devices. But let's say you don't have the chips in your devices. Well, and by the way, these all get fed back into a central system, and what they're talking about is trying to make the grid efficient. They don't care about you as an individual. It's not about individual property rights. And by the way, in a capitalistic world, I buy power. I say, produce as much power as I'm going to buy. I'll pay you for the power, and we're good to go. The power company, I happen to work for First Energy. I was a consultant with them. They have the ability, they have the capability to produce as much power as we want to consume. They can produce it if we want it. Unfortunately, our EPA is putting coal-fired power plants out of business, which is reducing the consumption, which is forcing them into a situation where they have to come up with techniques to better utilize the power that they're currently being able to generate. And they're struggling with that. So the government is forcing them into a situation where they're trying to better utilize the energy that's being produced. Well, they don't have to. In our consumer world, we can say, consume the power, I'll buy it, go out and build more power generation companies, we're good to go. But they don't like this whole capitalistic thing. That's not working for them. Here is an actual bill from a customer in Massachusetts. This is the kind of thing they do with smart meter kind of technology. This bill says, these are your efficient neighbors. These are all your neighbors. This is you. And you had better get in line with the rest of your neighbors. What ideology does that sound like to you? Does that sound like a free capitalist country where you've got to have free rights, you can buy whatever you want? Does that sound like, or does this sound like a fascist government that's saying, no, you know, and by the way, this is a nudging thing. We're going to give you 6 months to get in line, and if you don't get in line, we're going to come up with another technique. Now back to the opting out thing. Right now, First Energy, because they're just rolling this stuff out, they haven't reached a tipping point yet where they can force you into it. The meters belong to them. Legally, technically, they can replace their meter. You can't stop them. People were getting arrested for trying to stop people, stopping them. They have like an easement that can go up to your home, they can pull that meter off and they replace it. But they have set in place right now, because they don't want an uproar, an opt-out process. So they'll send you a card in the mail, and they say you get a right to opt out. You call them, they'll say, oh, really, you want to opt out? Oh, this is going to save you so much money. We don't know why you would want to opt out. Really, you want to opt out? And so you say yes, and then they hang up on you rudely. Because a number of us, and I happen to be I didn't know if I tell you, I'm the president of the Jog County Tea Party. And so because a number of us have been calling into the PUCO, the PUCO has gotten wind of this. They're supposed to be representing us. Apparently not. They have come up with the idea of doing it and run around us, opting out. And they said, well, we'll allow you to opt out, but you got to pay a fee to opt out. Matt Lynch has created a bill that he'll be putting into the House as soon as they go back into session. I can't remember the bill number. I think it's 9, but you can get a hold of Matt to let him know that. You'll want to support him on that bill, because that bill says people can opt out, no fee. No issues, no fee. You cannot force people to have a smart meter in their home if they don't want it. My suggestion to you is that you opt out. Whoops, I pushed the wrong button, sorry. This is another chart comparing you to your neighbors. So these are the efficient neighbors. Here's you. You better get in line. Just get used to that concept, because that's where it's going. And somebody would say, well, you know, that's First Energy, that's, you know, the United States wants to be competitive, and we want to have an efficient grid and all that kind of stuff. I asked the PUCO for some documentation on the smart meters. They sent me this document. data access and privacy policy. These are the policies that our energy companies are going to be using as they set up their smart meters. You know, I'm not a very good speller, but I looked at that word and I said, I don't think that's spelled right. And so then I got to looking a little bit deeper and I said, this document was created in London, England. Our data privacy and policy standards is not created by a United States, North American entity. This is set up by a foreign concern.
Socialist.
Where do we live? Do we want to defend our country or do we want to be part of a global community?
UN.
I want to be the United States of America competing in a global world.
Amen.
So that's just evidence for you. All right, I'm going to skip by that. I'm going to skip by riparian setbacks. How many people know about riparian setbacks? That's another technique for taking your property away from you illegally. I'll just touch on it real quick. Riparian setbacks have to do with water. If you've got water on your property, if you hear the term riparian setback, your zoning boards, in some cases, have created a zone around the water that says, yeah, that's really your property, but you can't do anything in that zone. We're going to create a zone around the water that we dictate what you're allowed to do. So if you got a pond, within 25 feet of that pond or 75 feet or whatever the zoning rule is, you're not allowed to have animals graze there. You can't have a fire pit there. You can't. They set the rules and regulations. Does that sound right to you? In essence, if this is your property and you've got water in all these zones, this is, for all intents and purposes, what you own. Because they control everything else. That's called riparian setbacks. They're having a big battle right now in the Supreme Court on Lake Erie shoreline, because it used to be that the people who bought a home on Lake Erie shoreline owned the property in front of their house. The state of Ohio is trying to take that away from them. It's in the Supreme Court right now. I'm going to skip by that. I'm going to touch on land conservancy briefly. Do you know the term conservancy, land conservancy? Here's what's happening with land conservancies. And the Western Reserve Land Conservancy is the big dog in this world. They are using your tax dollars, and you ought to object loudly to your representatives, to go out and buy up an easement on farmland, big chunks of land, under the guise that they're protecting it. Don't you want to protect farmland? Don't you want to protect property so that you've got scenic views and protecting the water and the watersheds and all that? Who wouldn't want that? Well, you know, if I'm owning a piece of property, I'm the best person to protect that property. I don't want anything to damage my water. I will protect it, and trust me, I'm armed, and I will protect it well. But what happens is the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, and this is an example, this is an actual, well, this is their plan, and they say that they're, this is out of the contract. This is an actual contract that I pulled off of the recorder's office in Geauga County. Western Reserve Land Conservancy and Geauga County commissioners spent $355,000 of your tax dollars for 284 acres to buy the easement. Just the easement. They didn't buy the property, they just bought the rights to control the property. Now the people who own the property, a retired couple, they're not going to farm anymore. They thought this was a great deal. They probably didn't read the contract. All they saw was $355,000. They can live there the rest of their life. They don't have to leave. They don't have to farm. And so it was a gold mine for them. What they didn't understand, or what they didn't think about, what most people aren't thinking about is the minute you sign this contract, you have now given control of your property to another organization, in this case, Western Reserve Land Conservancy. And there's no guarantees that Western Reserve Land Conservancy won't roll that property over to another organization who changes the rules. This contract, if you read it, anything that's done on this property has to be done in conjunction with a conservation plan that's on file. And so when they did this easement, they said, this is what you're doing today. That's okay. What you're doing today is okay. Going forward, everything that is done on that property now has to be done per the plan that was established. So if you're farming soybeans today, and tomorrow you want to raise dairy cattle, no, I don't think so. No, that's not in the plan. If today you've got 2 barns and a fence, and you want to put it in a pond because you're going to get your dairy cattle, no, sorry. We're not up for that because, you know, we're just protecting the land. We're just protecting farmland. They have all the rights, and if you violate those rights, if you do something contrary to the contract you signed, Guess who now owns the property? Not you. Guess who controls, who is behind these conservation easements? Who is going to be behind Obamacare? Who is enforcing Obamacare?
Obama.
Bingo. Who do you think is going to enforce these contracts? Now, how scary is that? This is just a paragraph out of it. It says, no industrial, commercial, yada, 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 on this property can do this. And it also goes on and says, there shall be no construction of new buildings, structures, or places of any dwelling, residence, building, athletics, da, 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 landing strip. It goes on to say you can't put in any fences, no ponds, there's all these you can't do's. So once you give that property over to them, now they control it. Forever, in perpetuity, you're not allowed to undo it, forever and ever and ever. Which means when you're dead and gone, the next person that buys this, future generations, 50 years from today, 100 years from today, will not have the same rights. You've stolen their rights, immorally, to be able to have the same right you have today to make decisions with property that you buy. They are doing this all over the state of Ohio. They are destroying property rights. Our kids and our grandkids will no longer have the rights to be able to own and enjoy property because you will have a third organization that will dictate to you how that property, if you happen to purchase it. By the way, doing this reduces the value of the property immediately. Go ahead.
Is that the same thing they do with those reverse mortgages?
No, the reverse mortgages are something completely different.
Okay.
But, and that's, we can get into that discussion. It has nothing to do with this.
Okay.
That's a financial thing. All right, so let's talk about NEOSCC. NEOSCC, Northeastern Ohio Area Sustainable Communities Consortium. I'm going to leaf through here real quick. Northeastern Ohio is basically, this is kind of a shadow government thing. In the 1970s, your tax dollars were taking away, there was a tax put on gas that you pump out of the pump, 18 cents on a gallon, federal tax. The federal government said, in order for you to get that tax back, you have to do that through something called an MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. That's a federal organization coming under a federal law. So the federal government dictates how we spend our tax dollars in the state of Ohio. I don't really like the federal government telling me how we spend our tax dollars, how we do our roads, how we do our signs, but that's what happens. We have an organization in Cleveland called NOACA, which is that organization. That organization is run by these people, Grace Galucci, who's paid $165,000 a year, appointed, unaccountable, unelected. The whole board for NOACA is unaccountable, unelected. Those organizations, the MPOs, there's 4 of them in Northeastern Ohio, got together and decided to take a Sustainable Communities grant. That grant created this organization called NEOSCC. NEOSCC is building a plan for your future. All of Northeastern Ohio. They say, oh, it's about you. It's about all the citizens of Northeastern Ohio because we want a sustainable Northeastern Ohio. That's important. And so because of that, they're out and about right now doing workshops to convince you, and you're not allowed to speak up at the workshops, to convince you that what they're doing is based on your input. So let me give you an example of how they're gathering your input. So they have a workshop, they'll put a board up, this is just an example. They put a board up and they say, here you got these stickers, and so here's Akron. Akron is, do you enjoy Akron? Is Akron a place that you would like and you go to and you enjoy the service and all that kind of stuff? And I don't really like Akron, so I don't go there. But some people say, oh yeah, they put a green sticker on that. Green means yes. And then they say, well, if you enjoy Akron, then surely you would want the region to invest in Akron, right? Not Akron to invest in Akron, not Akron taxpayers, but the region. In other words, we want Geauga County, we want Lorain, we want Lake County to invest in Akron. That makes sense, doesn't it? Now, how many people are happy with some of the decisions that people, the elected officials, are making in Akron? How many people think they can control any of the decisions that are happening outside of their own particular political district? No, you can't. The reason we have these political boundaries is because our founding fathers knew that if you keep your government close, you keep your government small, you can control it. The minute people are making decisions with your money out there someplace, you can't control that. So the minute you put a green sticker down that says, yeah, I want regional investment, the only way to have regional investment is to have a regional authority that makes those decisions. That regional authority is an organization you won't have any say over. Now, I'm not happy with the decisions that Cuyahoga County has made. I think they've destroyed Cuyahoga County over the last few decades. I remember the riverfront downtown Cleveland being a vibrant, exciting place to go in the flats. It was kind of a fun place. Do you remember why that changed? Do you remember the history behind why that changed?
The river catching fire? The river catching fire?
No. That was way before that. No. Recently, when the flats were, they had all the restaurants and stuff along the shoreway. You could go to the flats, and people would pull their boats up along the shoreway, and they'd have a good time and all that kind of stuff. But you know, you had a few people fall off their boats. Personal responsibility. They got drunk. They screwed around. They pushed somebody into the water. Next thing you know, the government says, "Oh, we can't have that. We can't have people, deciding themselves." And so they started putting regulations on the businesses downtown. They started creating policies that discouraged people from doing business along the lakefront. And then they thought, well, we can do something different. We can do something better. Have you been to the flats lately?
Yeah.
With a casino? I haven't been to the flats in a long time. I took my grandkids down to the aquarium recently. It's all gentlemen's clubs now. The Hustlers Club, it's all these lamp dancing places. And I hate to say that with kids because they'll be asking, what's a lap dancing place? Never been in one, I don't know what they're all about. So, anyway, what the NOSCC guys want to do is to create a plan for you. They took a grant from HUD, and by the way, in part, this is one of their studies. This actually came off of their website. You can go out to their website. By the way, I own NEOSCC.com. They were stupid enough not to buy it, so I bought it. And so they have NEOSCC.org. I own NEOSCC.com. So if you see a Stop NEOSCC out there, I own that website. I'm going to be putting a whole bunch more stuff out there. They're not happy about that. They told me, they said, that's not right. That's very underhanded.
Too informative.
Okay, so you're going to use 51 people to make a decision. This is they're basing decisions on this, by the way, a 51-person study to make decisions for 4 million people in northeastern Ohio. Does that make sense to anybody? If you ask them that question, they say, well, but there's a lot more people involved with that. Okay. This is right off of their website. These are their values. I'm going to ask you if this is a theme that you've seen before. They're engaging Northeastern Ohio to think about its future. We believe in creating a shared future. And we believe that it needs to be economically and socially equitable. Equitable. When our founding fathers found this country, their concept was equal justice. In other words, everybody gets an equal shot, but they don't get equal stuff. If you want equal stuff, you go out and bust your butt, and you earn it. I grew up so doggone dirt poor. My dad worked 2 jobs. I oftentimes didn't see him because he's working 2 jobs all the time. And he'd come home, and we had 8 kids in the family, and he'd say, and my mom would say, hey, we don't have anything to eat. So he'd say, come on, Skip, we're going to go squirrel hunting. And so we go out, we shoot a couple of squirrels, we bring them home, we clean them, we eat them. That's how poor we were. We didn't know we were poor. I didn't know we were poor. That's just the way it was. We'd say we really don't have anything to eat. We got chickens in the thing, go kill a chicken, bring it into the house, we'll have chicken soup. We always had food on the table. There was always we always had gardens, and so we had tomatoes and potatoes and canned stuff. They made apple butter every year. We didn't know as kids, 8 kids, we had a great time. We didn't know we were poor. Hunting with my dad was one of the most fun things that I ever did. But we were dirt poor. The value that he taught me was work your butt off and hopefully you'll get there. But life will not be fair. It is not going to be equal. People are going to treat you like shit. Excuse me, for anybody out there. I can't tell you the numbers of time people have not done something I want to say I've pursued a job and I've not gotten the job. I didn't know why I didn't get the job. It could have been because they didn't like the way I looked. Could have been the way they didn't talk. Whatever the case happened to be. They don't like me. They didn't hire me. I moved on. So what? You know, life happens. Stuff happens. That's what who cares? I had a guy try to get me fired. I worked for EDS for 12 years. He was stabbing me in the back because he didn't like the fact that I was assertive, I was making things happen, and he wanted to tear me down. Did you ever hear the crab game? Have you ever heard the old story of the crab game? I won't take up your time with that. I can do that later. But anyway, socially equitable is not what this country is founded on. It is founded on equal. Everybody has equal opportunity. They don't have equal stuff. You don't deserve equal stuff. And so, but NUSCC's mission is to create a vibrant, resilient, and sustainable Northeastern Ohio. I ask you the question, or I ask them the question, how do we know when we get to vibrant? If we have a goal of getting to be vibrant, how do I know when I get there? They can't ask you that question. Have we in Northeastern not always been vibrant? Have we not always had excitement for Northeastern Ohio and wanting to get ahead? That's what vibrant is. We've always had that. Contrary to, even though we've had to live through some of the biggest disasters from a political standpoint that I can think of. Who was the ex-congressman lately? Kucinich was a disaster as a mayor in downtown Cleveland. Other than that, we lived through him. We survived him. We were vibrant. We were resilient. But that's what they want to create for you. These are the people that control it. This is the board of NUSCC. Grace Galucci makes $165,000 a year, selected, not elected. Bob Now, selected, not elected. Jason Segedy, selected, not elected. Unaccountable, unelected individuals are making decisions for your future. I'm going to show you real quick. This is where they're taking you, by the way. I won't get into too much of this. There's a whole planning thing that's going on right now at a national level that determines what the best practice is for communities. I'm going to cut to the chase a bit, and this gives a little bit more detail. There's certain objectives that I have, and their biggest objective is to move all of us into more densely populated communities so that we have all this other space that's been saved out here for sustainability purposes. Okay, that's their objective at the end of the day. And there's all kinds of documentation around that I can go into. We don't have enough time for that right now. But they call those transect zones. Their objective, and they do this through zoning. See, people say, well, how can you do this? Well, they do it through zoning. They do it through rules and regulations. As a part of what NUSCC has done, they've done something called an AI analysis. AI analysis is analysis of impediments to fair housing. If you ask them the question, what's fair housing? They can't answer the question. They won't define fair housing, but they know what it is when they see it. So they've just done an analysis of Geauga County. Their analysis of Geauga County says we don't have enough minorities. Because they're all clustered, they got clusters of minorities. And so they've said, well, you don't have enough minorities. And we say, well, could that be by choice? Could that be by, there's all kinds of factors that play into that. What's the reasoning by that? Well, we don't know the reasoning, but it doesn't make any difference. We have to move some of these clusters. And so that's part of their objective is to do that. So I'm going to back up here and I'm going to show you the plan. They have another plan here that goes into that. They talk about that. Right, I think this is here. Yeah, where their intent is to, at a census tract level, change integration to meet what they have perceived to be the proper balance. Again, is that come back to our basic premise as a country? Free choice. People should be able to choose where they live. They should be able to choose what kind of property they live on. Whether you live on 5 acres, you live on an acre. How many people here have ever traveled to Germany? Do you travel to Germany? No? In Germany, you don't have 5 acres in the country like we have here. There are certain areas where you can go out and you buy 30 acres and you live on your 30 acres, you buy 5 acres, you buy 2 acres, whatever the case. In Germany, everybody lives in a village. The property around them, the farmland around them, may have owners, historic owners, but you have to drive your tractor out to the farmland. You can't live on the farmland. You drive your tractor out to the farmland. And they have roads and trails, and it's very pretty, kind of park-like in all of Germany. But that's because they don't have freedom. They don't have property rights that protects their property rights. They all live in a little community, all huddled together, and all the property exists out there protected by the government. I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in Germany. I went there, I went to the castles, I don't really like the food, I drank some wine, had some Wiener Schnitzel, played some soccer, but I don't want to live there because that's not fundamental to what I believe. Well, that's what HUD wants to do. HUD wants to change the way you live. And that goes in line with the Sustainable Communities grant that NUSCC took. NUSCC took a $4 million grant from HUD, and if you look at that grant, I didn't put the details behind the grant. If you look at the grant language says, if you take this money, you will accomplish these objectives. Those objectives are to change the way people live. That's what NUSCC is doing. Everything they're doing right now, if you go out to their website and they talk about all these workshops they've had and various things, all of that sounds good, but it is really a propaganda push to convince you that this is what we ought to do. To convince you that the policy should be, let's regionalize our dollars so we can give some to Akron and we can give some to Cleveland so they can continue their stinking thinking and making bad decisions. And so that is the reason that I say NUSCC is probably one of the biggest threats we have in the country today, because their objective and goal will actually transform how we live. Them together with the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, who is changing property rights in the northeastern Ohio, is a big threat. We got a lot of other threats going on. This will actually transform our lives. And so I'm going to ask that you, I don't know how many, did you go, everybody get this petition thing that I sent around? Because it lists the website to go through and all that kind of stuff in terms of going to that.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask, please, I need support in fighting these guys. We actually have gone to 3 of their forums and challenged them. I happen to sit on the NOACA board. I'm on one of the MPO boards. I'm there because Ralph Spitaleri, our county commission in Geauga County, had enough gumption to put somebody who doesn't agree with the other board members on the board. And so I regularly say no. Now, because they don't like that, they've now created a resolution on the board to change the rules to disallow me to sit on the board. Yeah. They have one meeting a month, a board meeting where the public gets to come in and watch what's going on. I've been inviting a lot of the public to come in and watch what's going on. They don't like that. So they're doing away with the monthly meetings and making them quarterly. Citizens are told, oh, you have all this input. You get 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting if you want to make any statement or comment. You can't ask any questions as they're discussing things. And then they make decisions. The decision will always be yes. The decision is predetermined when they walk into that room, and the decision is always yes. Now, I've been a fly in the ointment because I've been pushing their buttons and saying no. Let's talk about this. $30 million on bicycle trails when we got potholes and our roads are falling apart and our bridges are falling apart. Does that make any sense to anybody? In Chardon, we spent $651,000 on a 1-mile bicycle trail that 30 people a weekend are going to use. Does that make any sense to anybody? They got a drawbridge going across. They spent $6 million, or they've allocated, they haven't spent it yet. They want to put a sophisticated drawbridge, I can't remember the island on Lake Erie, that they want to put across so that it will give people the ability to walk from one part over to the island, but it's already connected. People can already get there. It's just that it was inconvenient. They didn't want people to walk around. And so $6 million they're going to invest in this drawbridge. Now, it's a very high-tech drawbridge. And so they could have had a simpler solution, but they didn't want the simpler solution. In Geauga County, we spent, I told you, about the $163,000 in card readers on buses that are carrying one person. There's so many of this nonsense. If you look at I asked the question one day on the transit authority. Look at Lake County Transit Authority, look at Cleveland Transit Authority, look at Geauga County Transit Authority, and see how many people are riding the buses at any given point in the time of day. Now, downtown Cleveland's better than most, because if you go during the morning, you go during lunch, you go in the evening, they do have good ridership, and I could see justification for that. At the end of the day, I want people to get where they're going. If they need a bus, then, you know, that's okay. I'm okay with that. But one person on a bus, for God's sakes, you know how much fuel we're consuming? Where's the sustainability in that? And so I asked a question one day in the NOACA meeting. Have we ever done a study and an analysis? Because maybe what we do is we take these huge 23 passenger buses or whatever they are, put them in the garage, and we put 7 passenger buses out on the road. Let's do a study to determine what the right approach is, rather than having these expensive infrastructure running around. Their answer was, well, no, too much work. We don't really do that. So anyway, I need help fighting that NUSCC thing. Because their shared future is not my vision of the future. So here's where I'll wrap this up. And hopefully I've bounced around on a lot of things, on a lot of topics, just to kind of get you excited about something, one of these topics, smart meters, Agenda 21, NUSCC, and I can come back and focus in and hone in on any of those specific topics at a deep level. You can go do homework on any of those things at a deep level. But the bottom line message is, I'll come back to the very beginning of my presentation. The only way for these things to change is to get more people involved and get them engaged. I'm the president of the Tea Party. We have made significant changes in Geauga County. People don't know that. We've now got 6 people, conservative individuals, lined up to fill trustee seats. And so we're going to be running them, and we're going to work our butts off to get them elected. We got Ralph Spitaleri elected in Geauga County. We're pushing back on NUSCC. We're going to hope to have a 600-person forum. That'll send a strong message. We are doing things. That is 50 people out of 90,000 people in Geauga County, 45,000 households. Think about what could happen if we had 1,000 people. We've got about 300, but 50 people that are actively engaged. And what's the old rule? 10% of the people do 90% of the work. So help us to get more people. We need people to show up at this event. So I'm going to ask you to help to do that, because we need that help. So being engaged is the most important thing you can do. If you want any more information on Agenda 21, and by the way, this is truly a nonpartisan thing. This is about the Constitution and the sovereignty of this country. It is not about partisanship. And so the best website actually in this list is probably this Democrats Against Agenda 21 website. There's a very well respected lady on this topic. I disagree with her in other areas ideologically. But on this particular topic, she's got her stuff together. And that's a great website to go to. And so, anyway, so that's the end of my presentation. Do you have any questions? Go ahead.
Is Spitaleri related to the Gallucci family from Starkville?
I have no idea. I didn't know it was familial or relationship. I know him to talk to him, and I know something about his ideology because we talked that.
Well, they're kind of distant relatives, or used to be of mine, through marriage.
Oh, really? Ralph is a very interesting character. Very interesting character.
Okay, and as far as the plan for electric carriers, they sent a note out, about 6 months ago, and the change in the electrical distribution for this county was supposed to go into a windmill program that extended all along the lakeshore, and they wanted to put in a new smart meter in the houses in Parma. I bucked them and encouraged my neighbors to buck them, and many of us succeeded. In the process of it, I said, I want to speak to the president of the company, and he did give me a call. And I said, how much is this smart meter going to cost the system? Only $218 million, as long as they can put up enough windmills along Lake Erie shore. And I said, and what happens if you don't have wind?
You know, this is amazing to me. You know, I'm a business guy. Again, everything is dollars and cents. X amount of dollars go in, X amount of dollars go out, and if you have anything left over, that's called profit. Okay? If you don't get profit, you go out of business. Our government doesn't think that way. To them, X amount of dollars go in, oh, that's not enough. We need more dollars to come in. Okay, so it's more dollars, more dollars, more. Now they're taxing water, rain now, and so the next thing that's going to happen is they're going to start taxing the air. You're going to find a way to tax the air you breathe. Trust me. So, but how many of you travel through Pennsylvania? Have you seen the signs along the road in Pennsylvania that says, your tax dollars go to subsidize windmills? a great alternate form of transportation, of power.
Want these?
I requested
No, whatever you
information,
wanna
I have a
do,
whole
then
bunch
throw
of
'em away.
information. My
Yeah,
problem is I
throw 'em
don't
away
have time in the day to research all the stuff that I do. But I requested information from our PUCO and the windmills that are going along Highway 30,